Hey everyone, and welcome back to Investing Talk podcast. Today, we're diving into some really interesting news in the world of autonomous vehicles, specifically a company called WeRide, ticker symbol WRED. The markets have been a little unpredictable lately.
Yeah.
The S&P 500 was up almost 3% in January, but just barely moved in February. But WeRide stock, now that's been on a wild ride, especially after a major tech player made a big move recently.
It has been quite a story. WeRide stock shot at almost 80% on February 14th. And, a lot of that is thanks to Nvidia, the AI giant. They decided to invest heavily in WeRide in the last quarter of 2024.
Wow, that's a massive jump. It makes you wonder, what does Nvidia see in WeRide that made them go all in like that?
Well, for one thing, Nvidia's investment basically doubled WeRide's market cap overnight, added about $4 billion to their value. To give you an idea of how serious they are, Nvidia actually sold off parts of their stakes in other AI companies, like Serve Robotics, ticker symbol SERV, and SoundHound AISOUN, just to free up the funds for this WeRide investment. Talk about a vote of confidence.
It definitely sounds like Nvidia is placing a big bet on WeRide's future. But what exactly is WeRide doing in the autonomous vehicle space that's got everyone so excited?
WeRide is developing a whole range of self-driving technology. They're working on everything from level 2 automation, think of that as like a really advanced cruise control system, all the way up to level 4 automation,
Okay.
which means the car can pretty much handle everything itself in certain conditions.
So we're not just talking self-driving cars here.
No, not at all. WeRide is going way beyond that. They're developing robo-buses, robo-taxis, even robo-sweepers.
Robo-sweepers.
And they aren't just tinkering in a lab. They already operate in 30 cities, across 9 countries in Asia, the Middle East, and Europe.
That's impressive. And their stock performance definitely reflects that excitement.
As of February 14th, it's trading at $30.81, which is significantly higher than both its 50-day and 200-day moving averages.
That's typically a good sign, right?
It is, typically. But here's where things get a little interesting.
Okay, you got my attention. What's going on?
Well, while the long-term trends seem positive, there are some short-term indicators that are flashing warning signs. If we look at the short-term moving averages, almost 93% of them are giving bearish signals.
Hold on, bearish signals. But you just said things are looking good long term. I'm a little confused.
It's a bit of a tussle, and that's what makes WeRide so interesting right now. The long-term trends look promising, but these short-term indicators suggest we could see some volatility in the coming weeks or months.
Okay, so what else should we be looking at to get a clearer picture of where WeRide might be headed?
Let's consider a couple more technical indicators. The RSI, or the Relative Strength Index, it's basically a way to measure if a stock is overbought or oversold. Right now, WeRide's RSI is approaching oversold territory, which, could mean a rebound is coming. However, the MACD, that's another indicator that helps us track momentum, that's signaling bearish momentum in the short term.
So some indicators suggest a rebound, while others point to a potential pullback. It seems like WeRide is a stock that demands close attention.
It certainly does.
But what does all this mean for investors who are considering putting their money into WeRide?
Right now, analysts have a buy rating on WeRide. However, their average 12-month price target is $22, which is quite a bit lower than the current price.
That's a pretty big difference. Are analysts anticipating a price correction then?
That seems to be the case. That gap between the current price and the target suggests that a correction might be in the cards. Now let's talk about WeRide's financials.
Okay.
Their revenue for the past 12 months is $30.17 million, which is a good start. But their earnings per share, or EPS, is still negative.
So they're not turning a profit yet.
Not yet. Current projections suggest they won't break even until 2027. Now this is where we need to consider the broader context. WeRide is operating in the autonomous driving industry, which is expected to explode in the coming years. For instance, Waymo, a major player in the self-driving space. They're planning to expand into 10 new cities this year alone.
So even though WeRide isn't profitable, yet they're in a sector with huge growth potential.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that with growth comes challenges. Increased competition and evolving regulations will be key factors that WeRide will need to navigate effectively.
This has been a fascinating look at WeRide so far. But before we wrap up this part of our discussion, what's your overall takeaway for potential investors? Should they be jumping on the WeRide bandwagon right now?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? WeRide is a company with a lot of potential, operating in an industry that's poised to really take off. But investors need to be smart about this. We've seen the stock surge, thanks to Nvidia. But there are those signs of a potential correction. It's a bit like the market itself right now, sending these mixed signals.
What do you mean?
Well, the S&P 500 started the year strong, with a 2.8% rise in January, but February's been much slower, just a tiny gain. So there's this push and pull between optimism and caution.
So are investors a bit hesitant, trying to figure out if WeRide is worth the risk?
Exactly. It's all about weighing those potential rewards against the uncertainties. And remember, the overall economic picture is relatively stable. Real GDP growth was decent last year, and projections for this year are in that 2 to 3% range. So, there's a solid foundation, but nothing spectacular.
So I guess a lot hinges on the autonomous driving industry itself. If it booms like everyone is predicting, then WeRide could be in a fantastic position.
Absolutely. That's the gamble that Nvidia's taking. And let's be real, they have a pretty good track record. When it comes to spotting those winning technologies, their investment in WeRide is a strong signal that they see a bright future for this sector.
So do you think that Nvidia's move could be a sign of things to come for the entire autonomous driving industry?
It's certainly possible. They're not just throwing money around. They've clearly done their homework. They've analyzed the market, the technology, WeRide's potential, and they've decided it's worth the investment.
But isn't there a chance that they're wrong? I mean, WeRide isn't making money yet, and the autonomous driving market is still in its early stages.
There's always risk involved, especially in an industry as cutting edge as this one. But I wouldn't call Nvidia's investment a reckless gamble. They're betting on the long game, on the future of transportation, and they're willing to be patient.
Well, patience is definitely a virtue when it comes to investing, but I bet it's tempting to chase those quick profits, especially when you see a stock like WeRide suddenly soar like it did.
Oh, I understand the temptation, but that's where discipline and a solid investment strategy come in. It's about making informed decisions, not emotional ones.
That makes sense. So getting back to WeRide, what should investors be keeping an eye on in the coming months? What are some key indicators?
First and foremost, pay attention to their financial performance. Are they getting closer to profitability? Are they hitting their revenue targets? These are crucial signs of whether WeRide is on the right track.
Okay, so financials are key. What else?
Keep an eye on the competition. You mentioned companies like Waymo and DeepSeek AI earlier. They're all vying for a piece of that autonomous driving pie. How is WeRide positioning itself in this competitive landscape? Do they have a technological advantage? Are they forming strategic partnerships? These are all things to consider.
You also mentioned the regulatory environment earlier. How could that impact WeRide's future?
Regulations play a huge role in this industry, especially for a company like WeRide that's still in its growth phase. New rules and regulations could significantly impact their operations. They need to be adaptable and ready to adjust to changes in the legal landscape.
It sounds like there's a lot for investors to keep track of.
There is, but that's part of what makes investing so challenging and exciting. It's a constant learning process.
So where does WeRide fit into the bigger picture of the autonomous driving industry? Do they have what it looks to be a major player?
It's hard to say for sure right now. The industry is still evolving. It's too early to crown any winners, but WeRide is definitely a company to watch. They have strong technology, they're operating in important markets, and they've attracted the attention and investment of a giant like Nvidia. Plus, they've got those robo-sweepers.
I'm still really curious about those. But on a serious note, thanks for sharing your insights on WeRide and the autonomous driving landscape. This has been really informative.
It's been my pleasure. I always enjoy diving into these innovative companies and industries.
For our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about WeRide, we'll include some links in the show notes.
Do your own research, dig deeper, and come to your own conclusions.
Investing is a personal journey. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
But remember, the more you know, the better equipped you'll be to make smart investment decisions.
Well said. Now, before we move on to the final part of our show, let's take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors. We'll be back in a moment with more insights from the world of investing, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. We were just talking about WeRide, a company making waves in the autonomous driving space and attracting a lot of attention from investors.
Yeah, and you can't talk about WeRide without mentioning that massive investment from Nvidia. Remember, they bought a big chunk of WeRide stock, basically doubled the company's market value overnight.
It was like Nvidia put a giant spotlight on WeRide and said to the world, hey, this company's going places.
Exactly, and that kind of endorsement from a tech giant like Nvidia carries a lot of weight, especially in a cutting-edge field like autonomous driving.
But as we discussed earlier, WeRide still has some challenges ahead of them. They're not profitable yet, and the competition is fierce.
That's true, and that's why it's crucial for investors to look at the whole picture. We've talked about technical indicators, analyst recommendations, and, in general, market sentiment. It's a complex situation.
So let's bring it all back to our listeners. What are the key takeaways they should keep in mind about WeRide and the autonomous driving sector in general?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. The autonomous driving industry has the potential to completely revolutionize transportation as we know it, and companies like WeRide are at the forefront of this revolution.
It's incredible to think about the possibilities, self-driving cars, robo-taxis, even those robo-sweepers. I'm still fascinated by those.
The potential is enormous, but we can't forget that this is still a relatively new industry. There will be winners and losers. Not every company will succeed.
So how can investors navigate this dynamic and sometimes unpredictable landscape and make wise decisions?
It all comes down to research, due diligence, and a solid investment strategy. Don't just jump on the bandwagon because a stock is making headlines.
That's right. It's essential to dig deeper, understand the company's fundamentals, their technology, their competitive advantage, and of course, their financial health.
And don't underestimate the importance of asking questions. Talk to financial advisors, read industry reports, and do your own independent research.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, especially in the world of investing. And remember, diversification is key. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, even if that basket seems like a guaranteed winner.
Absolutely. Spread your investments across different companies, different sectors, and different asset classes. It's a time-tested strategy for managing risk.
Great advice. So to wrap things up, what's your final thought for our listeners on WeRide and the autonomous driving revolution?
WeRide is definitely a company to watch. They have a lot going for them, but approach this investment with a balanced perspective. Embrace the excitement, but be aware of the risks.
And above all, stay informed. The world of investing is constantly changing, so keep learning, keep exploring, and never stop asking questions.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's been great exploring this topic with you.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on Investing Talk Podcast. We hope you found this episode insightful and helpful as you navigate the exciting world of investing. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave us a comment. We love hearing from you. Until next time, happy investing.